The axle shaft broke, and then that tore into the axle housing, and then the metal trickled down into the differential, and the whole gear case assembly was ruined from all that. From the moment that we broke down, we've had people offering a helping hand, whether it be taking our water jug into town with them to fill it up, bringing us beer. Marisa and I, on separate occasions, got into cars with complete strangers and hitchhiked, essentially, into San Jose del Cabo.
Listening to the GHT Overland podcast.
Baja over Christmas sounds warm and delightful. Broken down in Baja, not so romantic. However, how else are you going to discover the genuine character of people? It is that classic when the chips are down, who's got your back? Not that I'm surprised at this point, but more impressed with the overall character of the people in foreign countries, Mexico in this case. Yes, you still have the half-assed characters that you will hear about a bit later in this episode. Not all mechanics, foreign or domestic, are high caliber, no shortcut guys. Nonetheless, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, over and over, you will hear about the warm-hearted nature of people around this world. Now, if they're a politician, not so much. But not that we spend any time discussing greasy, gross politicians. Are all people of all countries awesome, good people? No. Every society, every group of people have their questionable characters. That's not going to go away. However, it's awesome to consistently hear how amazing the great majority of people are pretty much everywhere. There's a lot to learn in this episode. We talk mechanics, truck campers, composting toilets, business, and Baja. All great topics, even the one that's full of crap.
You never miss that opportunity, do you?
Nope. Just too easy. We hope you enjoy this week's episode with Eric. You can follow him and his wife, Marisa, under the Cummins Camper. Eric and Marisa live as full-time overland travelers after building a real estate business under the Airbnb platform. Be sure to check out their YouTube channel as well. Good dry humor with helpful tips and insights. And now, for Lisa with a few quick reminders and then on to the main event.
Be sure to tag us on the social medias so we can see what kind of awesomeness you're up to. Hashtag GHT Overland. This episode is brought to you by GHT Overland. Please keep in mind we'd love your support. Keeping all the algorithm spirits happy is kind of necessary. So if you wouldn't mind, at minimum, Level 1 Love is taking a second to leave a rating on iTunes or the podcast platform you listen on. Anything from a short little I like it to whatever you're feeling. Without constant love from you, we're just sludge at the bottom of a lost cold coffee cup. Level 2 Love is found on GHToverland.com. This is where we maintain a list of recommended apps, books, and gear. Thank you to everyone who has used these links. This also helps us earn a commission, costing you nothing extra. Level 3 Love is on Patreon. This is your opportunity to support the GHT Overland podcast with monthly little thank yous that help us pay web hosting fees, podcast hosting, and all the things that keep the podcast growing and improving. This is also how you get your hands on some sweet swag. Thank you for joining us as we pursue a renewed life mission of putting the best in people and nature on display, while tackling the ugly Goliath of today by consistently placing positivity and respect for others in front of everything else.
Eric, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it. Can you kind of give us a view for like where you're at, what the weather is? What does it look like where you are right now?
So we are in Cerritos, which is a town in Baja Sur, down in Mexico. And outside my window right now, it looks like the ocean is about a quarter mile away. So that's beautiful. And we've got a whole bunch of saguaro cactus and a bunch of small dwellings being built up here. And there's a whole bunch of RVers. It's about 75 degrees and full sun, which is consistent in Mexico here. We've only had rain one time in the almost 2 months that we've been over the border. So the weather's perfect. That's the best part about being here.
You've seen the rain as much as we've seen the sun.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Portland sucks in so many ways, but this time of year it is not conducive to somebody that needs a lot more sun.
You guys gotta pack it up and move south.
We've got like 3 months left and we're out of here and we'll be headed south.
Awesome. Good for you.
How long have you and your wife, Marisa, been traveling full time now?
So we started traveling full time in June of 2021. We were finally able to quit our full-time jobs and live off of our Airbnb income that we own a couple of and manage. And we do that full-time on the road while traveling. So it's been about 8 months now.
That is super cool. And I'm super excited to get into that. And we'll do that in a little bit. But like, I'm curious, have you guys always had this hunger for adventure in overland travel, or like what inspired this lifestyle for you?
My wife Marisa has been a traveler for the majority of her life. She's lived in Australia for a period of time, Hawaii, and then has moved all over a bunch throughout her childhood. So she's actually a big reason for our adventure lifestyle here. What I was, more of the part of the equation originally was I'm, a truck guy, and I also love RVing and adventuring in that regard. And so we kind of combined the two. I was more reluctant of, say, international travel with the camper than Marisa was. Marisa was fully gung-ho on wanting to come down here to Baja, and I'm really glad that she gave me the encouragement and the push to come down and check out another country. And, maybe one day we'll continue to explore Central America and South America. So I think that yin and yang kind of combination works really well for us. And I'm very appreciative of her push to travel further.
That's super cool. So have you guys settled into like a daily routine, or is it just take each day as it unfolds?
We do try and maintain a routine. And we've also kind of naturally fell into a routine of sorts while we've been on the road here. We typically start our day, like many people do, with a big old cup of coffee in hand. And a lot of the time I'll pick up a laptop and do some Airbnb stuff, check the boxes off for the morning. And then we try and maintain exercise, although I will say it's harder to be consistent with that on the road for us than it was when we were living in a normal house. We probably are able to maintain 3 to 4 days a week of exercise. Marissa's far better at maintaining that regiment than I am. But otherwise, after that workout happens, there's way less routine throughout our day. That's when a lot of the time you hop in the truck and go adventure, and those days can go many different ways.
So your truck camper setup originally caught our attention. Can you give us the brief rundown on your setup and why you chose a truck camper?
Sure. I loved the truck camper because it didn't involve having another set of wheels and axles and wheel bearings to be responsible for, plus the ability to be that much more compact and be able to park on a side street or in a parking lot where having a truck and trailer combination would be too large. Also, the ski resorts in the Northeast and other places in the country, but especially the Northeast, are really conducive to truck campers, whereas a truck and trailer combination, they do frown upon a little more so than the truck camper. But the fact that you have this all-in-one unit that gives you enough space to replicate that of a small tow-behind trailer in a very streamlined package was super appealing to me. And then down the line, especially once we got to explore west of the Mississippi, you start to realize the value of being able to go off-road with it where you wouldn't be able to with a truck and trailer. And that was just something that, being from the Northeast, you don't have an abundance of around like you do out west. So we've been really glad to have this nimble package when we've been in, like Big Bend National Park or other places where we've been able to take this thing a little bit off-road.
I love the wrap that you did. Is that a design you came up with on your own, or how did you get that done?
So the wrap is a great story. We actually were given a website with 5 million different wrap images to choose from. And then you can put in search items as you want to filter it down. And Marisa took it from probably 100 immediate options that she liked, and then brought it down to 10. And then we narrowed it down to probably 3 or 4 and chose this one. The company that did the wrap is somebody that I knew through my previous work life in the boat industry. The gentleman did wraps on boats for us at the marina. And then when it came time for us to do the wrap on our truck camper, I had seen that he had done a truck camper for professional bass fishermen and said, hey, would you be willing to do one for us? The image on the side of the wrap is actually from Glacier Mountain National Park. We didn't realize when we first chose it that it was from Glacier. We were in Theodore Roosevelt National Park at the time, and we had a couple come up to us, stand outside the rig, check out the wrap, and say, oh, we had lunch at that lake the other day. And we asked them, where is this wrap from? And they're like, oh, it's St. Mary's Lake. And we were so excited to hear that it was St. Mary's Lake in Glacier National Park. Knew that one day would be able to go there. It was on our journey for this summer, and we would be able to go there and theoretically park the rig right next to where this wrap is from. So when we were in Glacier, we went down the road, parked it right by St. Mary's Lake, and I was able to stand up on the hillside and get the truck in the foreground and then everything that's on the wrap in the background.
That is awesome.
Cool. So Chris's eyeballs popped out and he was salivating as soon as you said you could choose from a selection.
Where was a place that you had these 5 million options?
It was a website that was provided to me by the wrap company that's based out of New Jersey, but I'm sure I could get you the website.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Just as a reference if somebody else is looking to do something similar. Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So how are you guys feeling about the space, like elbow room, any limitations in being able to go off-road? Because it's a pretty big, like heavy setup.
It is, yeah. And I would certainly be willing to compromise some of the space that we do have in here in order to be more nimble. The space is more than plentiful for Marisa and I. We don't feel like we're ever impeding upon each other to a point where you want more space or you feel like you don't have enough. We believe that if we went to a truck camper that didn't have a slide in it, we'd still feel equally comfortable with one another in here. I think the compromise would be that many times when we've been traveling, we're oftentimes one of the bigger rigs, say if we're traveling with van lifers, and when it gets cold or foul weather and you want to all still congregate, our truck camper ends up being the host for that party. And if we had a non-slide out unit, I think that would probably be the sacrifice we'd have to give up. The entertaining aspect and being able to bring another couple and still not feel like we're that much on top of each other would be great. But the reality is that we just don't have those instances happen enough to warrant the added weight of the slide. performance standpoint, we would love to be a little bit lighter and less of a big heavy unit. But I also don't think we'd ever want to go as far as, say, a pop-up type truck camper. That might be, probably too far on the smaller space spectrum for what Marisa and I would want out of this lifestyle, because we do want this to be something that we're comfortable doing for years and years and years, and not feeling like in a tight space. Many people jokingly come into our truck camper and they're like, "Oh, this actually feels like a small New York City apartment," and we love that compliment. That's a huge positive to us.
That's nice. So for the benefit of our listeners that are not familiar with your rig and your setup, can you give us kind of the brief overview from the truck and the camper?
Sure. So the truck is a 2015 Ram 3500 dually. It's actually a cabin chassis model. So that means from the factory, it did not come with a pickup truck bed. It was originally equipped from the dealership with a flatbed on it. And then we added the toolboxes to the equation in order to try and maximize the storage that the flatbed yields. The camper is a 2005 Lance 981. So it has a 9'11" distance between the door and the bulkhead of the camper, which is quite a bit of space. And it does have one slide on it. So that allows for quite a bit of interior space and really opens up the whole footprint. And we also love how our truck camper has a ton of large windows. When you're down here in Baja like we are now, and you have the windows all open, you don't feel like you're confined. You're really able to see everything that's going on outside and feel like you're a part of your environment.
Okay, super cool. So I guess I'm just curious, now that you've got some time in the saddle, would you do it all over again the way that you currently have it set up, or would you take a different approach?
If I were to do it all over again, and I would say on iteration 2.0 of our overlanding, RVing lifestyle, we'll probably go with a bigger truck, and then one day a camper that doesn't have a slide. We would really like to be in a Ram 5500 instead of a Ram 3500. The 5500s allow you to do the single rear wheel conversion and have a payload capacity that is still ridiculous. The 3500 has a very good payload capacity, especially if we didn't have a slide out, but you are not able to find a wheel manufacturer that will build you a set of super singles for the 3500 that allow you to maintain the payload capacity that we would require out of the tires and such in order to be safe going down the road. We think that realistically, especially after being broken down here twice in the last month in Baja, we're thinking that a newer truck with a larger carrying capacity will be the upgrade that we make before changing out our camper. We've renovated the whole inside of our camper, and then with having done the wrap on the outside of the camper, there's not much that we have to desire out of a new camper other than the ability to maybe negate the slide and have just an overall smaller presence. But that would be, I'd sooner go with a bigger truck than a smaller camper at this point.
Is there any name that you've given the truck or the camper?
Yep. So we call the whole rig CC, like the two letters. We do that because of the Instagram and YouTube handle that we have, which is the Cummins Camper. So we call her CC for short.
Totally makes sense. So let's run through some basics real quick. How much fuel can you carry and how far does that take you?
So we have a 50-gallon fuel tank, which is another benefit of the cabin chassis configuration compared to the pickup body. That was a stock 50-gallon fuel tank, and that'll carry us typically between 500 and 550 miles. So again, kind of answering the question of what do we get for fuel consumption too, about 10 miles per gallon is our average MPGs.
Okay. Any issues getting diesel and DEF fluid there in Baja?
No. No issue getting diesel. Our truck is fully deleted, so we haven't had to deal with finding DEF. But diesel fuel and fuel in general is easier to find here in Baja than I originally thought it was going to be based on our research. There are definitely stretches, especially in the northern half of Baja, where you should have a full tank of fuel going into it. But once you get into Baja Sur, you'll find that there's far more fuel stops.
Okay. And how much water can you guys carry, and what are you doing to filter water if needed?
So we started out with 42 gallons of fresh water in our truck camper, but we have also converted our toilet setup to a Nature's Head composting toilet. And after we had the Nature's Head, I completely removed the black tank and added in an additional freshwater tank of 25 gallons that I tied in to the stock 42 gallon tank. So we're able to carry 67 gallons of fresh water, which lasts us an incredibly long time because we're not flushing a toilet. We're only doing dishes in here, drinking water, and then showers, which after you're doing this for a long enough time, you don't find yourself showering quite as often as you did in your sticks and bricks lifestyle. And as far as filtering the water, we have still been going to the purificados in order to get water rather than just taking water from a tap at, say, a campground, or if a friend offers it from one of the rooftop style water canteens. But we do have a UV water filtration system in our camper. We have the, I'm possibly going to pronounce this wrong, Aquava UV water filter. So we're kind of really doubling down on crossing our T's and dotting our I's with water here in Baja to make sure that we don't have any kind of contamination of our water supply.
Can you give us a little inside view on your electrical system and how that's working for you?
Yeah, so we have 480 watts of solar from Renogy. We have two 100 amp hour batteries from Battleborn, and we have a 3,000 watt inverter from Renogy powering our truck. And then we also have, it's not a DC to DC type charger like many folks have. It's kind of what they had out prior to that from Battleborn. It is a battery isolation monitor or battery isolation manager. And that device regulates the time in which the alternator is connected to the batteries. The alternator for the truck is connected to the house batteries of the camper. It does 15 minutes on and then 20 minutes off. That way you don't hopefully smoke out your alternator. And we've been running that for about 2 years now and have been problem free. And it definitely makes a huge difference in terms of our recharge cycle on days where it's cloudy to be able to replenish those two batteries while driving down the road. And I would even say that some semblance of a DC to DC connection is as valuable as solar, if not more valuable than solar, to the majority of truck camper owners, since people typically are on the move more so than, say, a tow behind. But it's been faring extremely well for us down here. We haven't ever had to plug in since we've been down here. There's been 35 days straight where we were broken down on the East Cape of Baja, and our solar panels did everything for us the entire time we were there.
Well, that's good.
Oh, yeah.
So what size of refrigerator are you guys using?
That's a great question. It's the stock refrigerator that came with the truck camper.
So it's the stock fridge that came with a camper. Is it working for you? Do you wish you had more space, or is it pretty adequate so you're not too worried about things?
The size of the fridge is great. We actually say that we can house almost as much stuff in our fridge as we would in a regular household fridge. What you find that's different is in your household fridge, you have plenty of space to spread out all those items, and so it's easier to find them. Whereas in the camper fridge, you end up having to play a little bit of Tetris with how you arrange everything in order to optimize the space that you have. But we're able to have enough items in our fridge to last us typically a week to a week and a half of being off grid before needing to go back to town for food. we also find that with things like water that is bottled or alcohol, beer and stuff like that, you just keep a stash of it in the closet, and then as you take one beer out of the fridge, replenish it with another. So that's another difference between, a household fridge where you could have a plentiful amount of beer on stash, but in the RV life, you just have to keep a couple of warm ones and swap them out for a cold one.
Seems to be the ongoing theme that we learned from Tim and Kelsey. You take one beer out, you put one back in.
Yep, that's the move. I'm still trying to figure that out consistently. Marisa reminds me, Eric, when you take one out, put one back in. One day I'll figure it out.
And the heating and AC, how's that working for you? Is it a good setup?
So in this camper, when we bought it, it didn't have a air conditioning system at all. We added that because we lived in it full time in a stationary manner in New Jersey, which is a very humid summertime climate, and it is a Coleman Mach 8 Cub. I chose this one specifically and love it because of the fact that you can run it on a 15 amp extension cord or just a Honda 2200 traditional 15 amp outlet. You don't need any kind of a 30 amp setup. It also is very low profile, so it is the same height as my solar panels are, and so I'm not stuck adding more height to my overall rig by having this very tall air conditioning unit. And then for heat, we've been through a couple of different iterations of heat, and that was a fun part of the whole truck camper learning experience. When we first bought this camper and did our first wintertime excursion with it, we went into the whole scenario thinking we would be fine with what Lance provided you back in 2005 with single pane windows and a propane furnace that guzzles electricity. And after one night of that, I realized we have to make some changes. Or the second heating system that we had in this was a Camco Wave 8 heater, which is similar to the Mr. Buddy heaters, but on a slightly bigger scale where it's a catalytic type heater. That was great for a while, but the flaw to it was that you had to set it up and break it down every time you moved. Finally, we decided to make the plunge and do a diesel heater, and I've had zero regrets ever since that. I am a huge diesel heater advocate. It pulls almost no amperage when it is running, other than a short bit of higher amperage on startup. It uses so little fuel throughout the day, and it also creates this extremely nice dry heat for the winter months. And at this point, I've actually ducted that, or created a ductwork system for that diesel heater to where everything that was originally designed to have heat plumbed to it in our camper from Lance is now getting that same heat from the diesel heater, which was a bit of a chore because the propane heater from Lance originally, the separation of the 4 different ductwork ports was built into the heater mechanism itself, whereas the diesel heater comes to you with only one outlet. So you went from a furnace with 4 outlets to a diesel heater with 1. And so I've had to create this Frankenstein of a manifold system in order to get the heat to go to all the different places, but then equally importantly, to make enough pressure to go, say, down into the holding tanks below the floor at a more rapid rate than it goes into, say, the bathroom that's a really small compartment and doesn't need a ton of heat before it turns into an oven.
Yeah, I can't figure out why more camper manufacturers don't just go right to the diesel heater, why they're still using LP. But that's just
I wish they would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that camper manufacturers should really start doing diesel heaters and then offering a higher, electricity package, a higher battery package that would allow for induction cooktops right out of the gate, and then having a compressor fridge instead of having the ammonia propane type one. Those items alone would be a massive game changer for the truck camper community. And that's one of the reasons why I'm less interested in upgrading campers than I am upgrading, say, my truck. Because at this point, we've got all these upgrades that you still can't get from a camper manufacturer. So I'd have to either take these items with me or buy them again to duplicate what we have now.
Yeah, makes sense.
Considering your entire setup, what's one thing you find indispensable?
Ooh, I only get one?
Yes.
Choose wisely.
I think I would probably say the Nature's Head composting toilet, or a composting toilet of some sort. Not having to fiddle around with going to dump stations is a really huge blessing. Down here in Baja, we've been traveling with some friends who have a small Class A motorhome, and they couldn't find a dump station in San Jose del Cabo, so they ended up having to pay a company that goes around to pump out porta potties to pump them out, and it cost them $50 per RV to be dumped out. And I'm over here with my composting toilet going far more days without having to deal with it than they are with their black tank, and then I'm not having any cost affiliated with getting rid of the stuff.
Yeah, you've got your feet up, relaxing with a beer.
One in, one out.
That's right.
One in, one out. Anything you've never used or removed?
Yeah. Something that many people would think that you would carry forever with you in your truck camper adventure rig. Stand-up paddleboards, inflatable stand-up paddleboards. We carried them with us all summer when we traveled from New Jersey out to Montana and down to Colorado. But then when we circled back to New Jersey, that was the first thing that we were happy to take out of our rig, because the setup time on them is more than I really care to invest into a bit of paddleboarding. What we'd actually like to change them out to would be inflatable kayaks that are on a smaller scale. We feel like the paddleboards are cool for like 1 hour of paddling around, but to do a full day adventure, we'd find ourselves using kayaks more, because then you can pack lunch with you, bring a bathing suit, bring clothes, a whole bunch of other items that would allow you to make it a day trip rather than just some novelty 1 hour long paddle around a pond. We did use them a couple times, but it just, the amount of space that they took up compared to the amount of time that we used them, it was an easy thing to leave at home.
And what's at least one favorite meal?
Ooh, so I would say our favorite truck camper meal, and one of the ones we're like most proud of, is in our truck camper, we don't have an oven. We've got the stovetop, and we bought one of those Omni ovens. And for people that don't know, the Omni oven looks almost like a bunt pan, but the way that it draws the heat up through the center of it with a lid creates an oven-like effect, and is a great oven substitute if you don't have a traditional oven in your camper. But we make an awesome lasagna in this Omni oven, and we've shared it with many people along the road, and people are blown away that this delicious lasagna comes out of something that looks more like it should be making an upside-down pineapple cake.
All right, sorry, I had to pull up the Omni oven on the Google and see what the hell it was. That looks pretty cool.
Yeah, they're great. I think they're more common in the van world because it's more common for folks in vans to not have an oven compared to truck campers. Ours was kind of an anomaly where from the manufacturer, they put a convection microwave where an oven would have gone. We took the convection microwave out actually and put in a 28-inch 12-volt flat screen TV instead of having the convection microwave there, because we never want to have to be reliant on being plugged into a generator or having to draw that much amperage off of an inverter just to run a microwave. So we also use that space where the convection microwave was to put our Battleborn batteries inside so that they're temperature controlled all the time.
Eric, for travel days, what, if any, kind of planning are you guys doing?
Most days of travel days are pretty loose on the planning. All summer, we didn't have much of a plan when we left New Jersey. The plan was just to go west, and whatever would come of that on a day-to-day basis, we would likely say yes to opportunities and just see where it took us down the road. But this fall, we did have a bit more of a concrete plan leaving New Jersey and knowing we were coming down here to Baja. So a lot of the time, Marisa will be the one researching what we're going to do on a day-to-day basis. She'll be looking up neat roadside attractions and cool towns, cool restaurants to go check out while I'm doing the driving down the road. But outside of that, we don't like to do too much planning. We love the spontaneity that this whole lifestyle allows us. And because we're not, I shouldn't say stuck, but I'm going to say stuck. We're not stuck doing a 9-to-5 job. We're able to do our Airbnb business when we want, or when it requires us to, all the time on the road. So I guess that would be the downfall, is we do always have to be connected, but we don't have to structure our lives around a work schedule. So that allows us to be very free with our travel days.
Okay. Do you guys make any considerations for trying to stay off the beaten path, or is it just freeways from one town to the next and then try and find some cool camp place?
It depends on what part of the country we're in. For our time where we left New Jersey this fall to head towards Baja, for example, we had already seen a lot of the things that we wanted to see from New Jersey to about the Mississippi River. We've explored a lot of that prior to being full-timers. So we did highways, from there on, or from New Jersey to about the Mississippi River. But then once we got beyond the Mississippi, we started to hop off the highway and check out different smaller attractions and smaller roads. We do try and avoid highways in general because you find so many more unique things to check out on side streets rather than just interstates. But there's also a time and a place where, you're striving to get from point A to point B, and it's less about the immediate journey of the drive and more about the journey that you're going to have when you arrive at your destination.
Okay. And since you need to stay connected, what's currently working for you on cell coverage, whether it's different SIM cards when you went into Baja or jetpacks? What's working for you?
So our primary phone coverage is from Verizon. And when we came down here to Baja, we were told that AT&T has bought Telcel. And so Telcel is a major cell phone manufacturer down here, or a cell phone provider down here in Mexico. And having both networks was really important to us because we didn't want to be in an area where one didn't work, and we would have been longing to have the other brand in order to maintain connection to the outside world. We haven't done the whole Starlink jump yet. I think at some point when Starlink becomes a little bit more streamlined, we'll make the leap into having constant internet no matter where we are. That would definitely allow us, from our Airbnb standpoint, to travel to places that we otherwise might avoid because we don't have cell coverage, and we do have this nagging need to feel connected at least a couple times a day. But having Verizon and having AT&T has definitely worked well for us while down here in Mexico. So that would be my advice for people that are going to come south of the border. Or, if you just had an AT&T hotspot or a Verizon hotspot, it doesn't have to be two different cell phones themselves.
And when you are off the beaten path, any recommendations on either apps or a GPS that you use to find your way around?
Like most overlanders, iOverlander is our go-to for finding places. We use Waze for a general navigation. But also we've been using Campendium. That's another great one. My favorite is when you can find the same spot on iOverlander and Campendium, and both have, great reviews of the spot that you're going to head to. That really makes me feel warm and fuzzy when planning where we're going to end up at the end of the night.
Yeah, probably a lot more confidence that something's going to be there.
Right.
And what are a couple favorite places you've been to so far?
Ooh. Our favorite state that we've been to so far has definitely been Colorado. We love the fact that in Colorado, you've got this ability to go from, let's say, Denver to Breckenridge in 2 hours, and you have such a change in the landscape and the weather, but you're able to do it in a 2-hour drive. We enjoyed Montana immensely, but our one criticism point, and it's not like Montana can change this about itself, but it's a long drive between most major destinations that you're going to want to check out as a tourist in Montana. Whereas Colorado, it was just like hit after hit after hit of great places, all within a pretty short drive. So we really, really like that about Colorado. Other than Colorado, I would say Baja has been our favorite place because the cost of travel down here overall is way less than that of the United States. Food here is pretty darn inexpensive. Beer is really inexpensive. They're very accommodating of you parking almost anywhere and not having to pay for it. There's nobody really bothering you if you want to go to the beach and just park your truck on the beach and live there for a month. We also found that the people down here are incredibly nice. So it's a really warm, inviting environment from a person-to-person perspective, whether that be the people that have become expats and live down here full-time or the people that are originally from here. Everybody's been incredibly nice, and we look forward to coming back to Baja again next winter and spending probably even more time than we have on this trip. So I would say Baja is probably number one, and Colorado would be number two.
It's really cool. Baja looks really nice every time I see a picture, and then I look outside, and it's right now is exactly what it's been for the last few months, about 40 degrees, overcast, and probably a little bit of rain.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of what New Jersey sounds like.
Yeah, I bet.
Glad to not be in those environments.
What's the number one biggest challenge you've had to face?
Yeah, I think it would be the current breakdowns that we've had would be our biggest challenge that we faced. Prior to this breakdown, we've had smooth sailing for the most part, other than some tire issues here and there this summer. The axle failing in Baja here has been our biggest thing to overcome. Between not being fluent in Spanish, breaking down in a place that doesn't have cell phone service, 20 miles from any kind of a major city, was very, very trying, especially at first, until we kind of settled in to the realization of everything's going to be fine. It's going to just take a little bit longer than it would in the United States. That has been our biggest challenge, where we were broken down for 30-something days waiting for parts to come back from being rebuilt. And then even after having them rebuilt and putting everything back in the truck on the side of a dirt road in Mexico, we've now traveled about 100 miles from that breakdown spot, and we found that the repair that was done wasn't done properly. They took the existing broken axle shaft that we had and just welded it back together and plopped it back in there and said, send it down the road. And now we found that that axle shaft is not entirely straight and true. So it was wearing on the inside of our axle housing. And now we're on the side of a different road, fortunately right next to a friend's house here, and waiting on getting a new axle shaft from the Ram dealership in La Paz.
That's got to be super frustrating.
It is.
Just starting all over again?
It's not starting all over again. To dive deeper into what happened from a mechanical failure at our original breakdown, the axle shaft broke, and then that tore into the axle housing, and then the metal trickled down into the differential, and the whole gear case assembly was ruined from all that. So at least this time we caught it early enough that the only necessary item to replace is the axle shaft. The axle housing is fine, and the gear case is fine. There's no detrimental catastrophic failures there. It does really kind of suck because it's another $900 that we're spending for an axle shaft that should really cost like $200 in the States, but because here the only real option for getting a new one is going through the manufacturer and paying the manufacturer type premium plus shipping. What should cost about $200 in the States is going to cost us about $900 here in Mexico.
That's nuts. Well, at least you've got some good mechanical skills from your days working on boats, right?
Yeah, we've had some great friends that have been really helped out on the mechanical front. My friend Matt, who's been traveling with us, he's super mechanically inclined. My friend Scott, whose house we're parked next to, he's also very mechanically inclined. And so having many hands, many minds has made this whole process smoother than it could have been if it was just me by myself. So I got to certainly give credit to the community around us.
That's crazy. So on hygiene and laundry, how are you managing laundry? Is it laundromats or what's working for you guys?
When we're in the States, we do laundromats. Down here in Mexico, it's more of a laundry service. You drop all your laundry off to them, and you pay almost the same amount that you would to have to do your own laundry in the States. But what's great is it comes back to you folded and in a nice vacuum sealed bag. It's very nice. I wish that we could get these kind of laundry services in the States at the same price that they are down here, but that's part of why people come to Mexico for the savings. And it's been nice to not have to do our own laundry. You get all that time back, which is quite a bit of time compared to that of sitting in a laundromat. As far as hygiene goes, we have a shower in our camper. We use it only when we really have to. It's just not that comfortable to shower in there. We've been using the ocean as our primary source of a shower and bath, and then once a week or so probably take a shower in here, or in a perfect world we'll find friends' houses that we can shower in. When we're back in the States, we're members of Planet Fitness, and when we're stateside we hardly ever use our shower in here because we like to go to the gym anyway, so we'll kind of structure part of our day about going to Planet Fitness, or every couple days going to Planet Fitness and getting in a workout and a shower simultaneously.
So just to plug your YouTube channel, although it's new, you did a great video on your composting toilet. We clearly talked about that a little bit. But any more advice to someone else that's looking not to have that black tank and how to deal with all the crap?
I would definitely recommend to everybody who's thinking about a composting toilet to make the leap. There's some concern people have that it's going to smell, and I think that that's by and large incorrect. There's, comparatively speaking to a black tank, it has no aroma. There are times where if you let it go too long in the solids department, it could smell, but I believe at this point there's a composting toilet manufacturer for almost every truck camper brand out there. I know that, for example, the Northern Lights won't as easily fit, say, a Nature's Head composting toilet, but the brand called Seahead fits really nicely in the Northern Light campers. And the Seaheads are a pretty darn interesting setup. They have a different auger mechanism than the Nature's Head. But I feel like if you're thinking about doing a composting toilet, you should do it. You won't regret it. You'll find yourself being very glad that you did it at some point down the line where you're in a scenario that a dump station's just not available and you would have had to change your whole course of action in order to find a place to get rid of your stuff. And with a composting toilet, it's so much more streamlined.
Eric, on safety, what are you guys doing to be smart about safety, both personally and for personal documents and belongings?
So from a safety standpoint, we don't take any drastic leaps and measures to protect our documents or ourselves when we're in the camper. We, more than anything, try and make sure that wherever we're going, we look around and use our eyes and use our common sense and not ever put ourselves into a place where we feel like we're going to be necessarily harmed in any way, whether it be our rig or ourselves personally. We don't carry a firearm. It's not that I'm against firearms. I just don't have a permit to do so. We do have bear spray in the camper that I keep next to my bedside for the old just in case. For our documents and stuff, we just hide them within the camper. We haven't figured out a great place for a safe. If you guys know of any great small safes, I would love some recommendations, because that would be something that we'd like to try and do a better job of accommodating. But otherwise, mostly just trusting your gut.
Makes sense. So on love and conflict, two people in a small shared space has got to have its challenges. During times of stress and conflict, what have you found that works for you in navigating those times?
I will say, I think that for Marisa and I, we found that we don't have any larger stress or conflict than we did in our traditional house. The fact that we're in 120 or so square feet doesn't really change the stress dynamic for us. If you need space from somebody because of stress and conflict, whether it's in our house or in our camper, I think we would just find that taking a moment to step outside and have a breather would be done in the same manner at home or in the camper. Our house that we have in New Jersey, it's not like it's some gigantic mansion where you can run to a separate wing and truly be away from each other. It's a 2-bedroom home where, you're going to be around each other and need to discuss whatever the topic is and figure out a solution in the same way that we would have to do it here in the camper.
So do you and Marisa intentionally plan personal time for each of you, or how do you keep your sanity?
No, we don't really plan any personal time separate from one another. We do find that our workout is a lot of the time our opportunity to have some time alone from each other. We'll throw our headphones on and listen to music, and if we're at a Planet Fitness, we don't, exercise together. And even when we do outdoor workouts here outside the camper, we'll typically do them at different times. Marissa's more of an early bird than I am. I sleep in a little bit later. So that ends up also being kind of our time apart in the morning. Marissa's usually up around 6 o'clock, and she'll go for a nice morning walk and drink her coffee, and then come back to find me probably still snoozing at about 7:30. And then our workouts will typically happen shortly thereafter, but again, in just typically a slightly different time frame than one another. So you have a bit of separation, but I think that if you're a good team that really can handle being in a small space, you don't find that you need a ton of time separate from one another, at least in our case.
So it sounds like, as in life, make sure you've got a good relationship before you go off onto some crazy adventure.
Yeah. And I think that if you find yourself on a crazy adventure with someone, it's going to pretty quickly help you figure out whether that relationship will or won't work, whether it's in a tiny space or not.
Especially with enough beers or tequila.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so one thing that I'm really fascinated with is your Airbnb business, and finances in general are just kind of a topic that I really enjoy. So you've got a couple properties with Airbnb. I don't know anything about the Airbnb business, but how is it possible to manage these properties while you're in Baja? That's fascinating to me, and I just don't get it.
Sure. So when we were living at home in New Jersey before being full-time travelers, we really spent a lot of the time trying to make sure that we found cleaning companies or cleaning people that were really reliable, great to work with, and could be our eyes and ears on our homes while we're away. And so everything that you do on a day-to-day basis as an Airbnb manager is all done through their platform, and you're able to coordinate with your cleaning folks what the timeline is for check-in and check-out of different guests, and then they come in and let you know essentially if something's out of place, and we would then order more paper towels or whatever the item might be. And then also, if you have something that is a bigger issue, you kind of deal with it the same way you would if you were at home. We had our water heater in our New Jersey home fail, and it was pouring water all throughout the basement. and our guests let us know that the hot water wasn't working in the house. And then we called a plumber. The plumber came over and rerouted the water so that they could still have cold water throughout the house, and then came back the next day with a new water heater and fixed it. It's literally the exact same way I would have handled it being back home. I wouldn't have tried to fix the water heater myself. I would have probably been at my regular job and felt that the urgency of trying to satisfy the guests would have been more imperative than trying to save a few bucks by me doing it on my own. So it's all about how you set up your Airbnb business ahead of time before getting on the road that will allow you to do this stuff without having to be present.
And how has COVID impacted the Airbnb business?
So COVID has been a blessing and a curse for the Airbnb business. When we first started our Airbnb, it was shortly after the initial lockdown that the United States had. And once they removed the lockdown, that was about when we had our house up on Airbnb, and people knew that they weren't going to be able to travel internationally the way that they had been prior to COVID, but they still wanted to go away on vacation for the summer, for a week trip. And so our house in New Jersey is on a lake, and it booked up incredibly fast. And same went for our ski condo in Vermont. COVID really encouraged people to do an outside activity all last winter when COVID cases were going up, and skiing became an avenue for people that had never skied before to stay outside, stay safer, and enjoy their lives still and travel. So it's been great in that regard, but we have found that because of COVID, you do have more cancellations, and you also have the guests have a desire for a more flexible cancellation policy, because they want to know that, hey, if I get COVID last second, I can still cancel my stay and not lose my money that I've put out, for the accommodations. So you definitely have to be willing to, as a host, risk getting these last minute cancellations and trying to fill those voids in a timely manner and a last minute manner. But it's more important, in our opinion, to have that flexible cancellation policy present to get people to initially book than it would be to try and stay steadfast to a more strict cancellation policy in hopes that people, had to follow through with the reservation, because people can filter based on what your cancellation policy is when they're making their stay.
Oh, got it. So what does it look like? Day-to-day management of your business, what does that look like? What are you having to do?
So typically every morning I wake up, and one of the first things I do is go through the guests that are going to be checking in today, making sure that they've got all their check-in instructions, and that if we're going to go adventuring and maybe be without service, that we're not going to be leaving somebody accidentally open-ended on their information that they need in order to get into our house, or whatever the case might be. The second thing that I typically do will be go through the calendars for our house. We also manage 2 other people's Airbnb, so that's another cool thing to kind of add into this conversation, is that once you've got your own Airbnbs going, you're going to find that, other friends of yours that may have a second home are going to be like, wow, I would love to do that with mine. How can I get involved? And there's sometimes a mental hurdle for people to jump into the Airbnb space, but where we've got the existing skill set at it, we made these people feel really comfortable allowing us to manage it for them. And so that's another revenue source for us, is now becoming like Airbnb managers of other people's properties. So I'll also take a look at their calendars each morning and see, in the next 2 weeks, do any of these properties have a 1-day void or a 2-day void, where maybe if I lower the price by a few dollars, it will get those days to book out, because you really don't want to be left with inventory of days at your Airbnb property. If you can fill ideally all days in your month, you're going to come out at the end of the month far further ahead than you would have been if you tried to hold your prices higher and ended up with more voids in your calendar. So after that, I'll typically just be waiting almost on inquiries from guests to book our Airbnb, or questions from our guests. And those are just sporadic throughout the day. Some days you have complete radio silence, and other days you have just an influx of questions and inquiries and small things to do here and there. But most of the structure of our Airbnb management is in the mornings.
Got it. Appreciate you taking the time. It's just fascinating to me. What is,
sure.
if you were to break down your overland travel budget, what does that look like monthly for you guys?
Oh, that's a tough one. We don't really have a direct budget. We did plan ahead with our savings and stuff and our Airbnbs ahead of time. We had enough knowledge that we knew that when we were on the road, unless we were out spending an egregious amount of money, we would be financially able to cover our expenses. So for that reason, we haven't really dialed in a direct budget. We don't really focus too hard on our month-to-month expenses. We try and be as intelligently frugal as possible. We really hate to ever, for example, spend money on accommodations of a night stay. So we really always try and be somewhere that's a free camping spot. And we try and spend our money on experiences like exploring a city or going out to eat and enjoying the food culture. But yeah, we don't have a direct budget.
Okay. So what's your best advice to others that are held back thinking that it's going to cost them a lot of money to be able to do this? Do you think someone could plan on maybe $3,000 a month, $2,000? Does it need to go the other way to like $4,000 a month? What would be your recommendation to other people?
In terms of an amount of money to expect to spend per month in order to do well, I think that probably $2,000 a month is on the reasonable side if you're one person traveling. If you're a second person traveling, or if you have a second person with you traveling, I would say probably about $3,000 a month. But all of that will be contingent on how quickly you plan to move throughout the country or throughout the world. If you're moving at a slower pace, you'll find that you're able to save quite a bit more money, as most overland travelers, fuel is our biggest expense on a month-to-month basis. So, for example, when we were broken down for a month here in Baja, we had no fuel expenses, and our finances that month, or expenses that month, were dramatically lower than November, where we beelined it from New Jersey all the way to basically Arizona at that time. So we had a much higher fuel expense that month. So it's also tough to give people like one number on a per month, because if you look at it over 6 months, probably $2,000 would be more appropriate, but there will be months where you're going to probably spend $4,000. So you do need to make sure that you have a buffer there for those busier months of travel, or travel at a slower rate. We also like to talk about 0 days. That's a cool one. Friends of ours while on this trip gave us that term. 0 day is essentially what it sounds like. You have a day where you spend no additional money. So if you bought food earlier in the week, of course you can eat that food, but you're not going out and going to have drinks. You're not putting fuel in the truck. It's a true 0 day. And if you kind of get a little bit of joy out of having those 0 days, you'll find yourself having more and more of them. And those are kind of a neat way to feel good about your monthly expenses, is strive for as many 0 days as you can.
I love it. Haven't heard that one before. Love it. What do you have any other thoughts on financing, saving, investing, money wise? Anything else?
I would say real estate would be a good one for people from an advice standpoint on finances. Invest in real estate. Invest in the Airbnb opportunity. What I have given people the advice on that are impressed by what we've done in our Airbnb world is, when you go to buy your first home, look at a home that has the ability to be rented from a short-term perspective. You can always fall back on using that short-term rental as a long-term rental, but to buy a house in just a traditional neighborhood might not yield you the same opportunity financially as buying a house or a condo that's at, say, a ski mountain, even if that's not exactly where you want to live forever. The ability to turn that asset into a revenue source through passive income is amazing. We like investments in traditional manners too. You know, we have money in 401ks and the stock market like a lot of people do. And we've had money in the past in Bitcoin and stuff. But from a really long-term standpoint, I think for us, we're going to want to continue to add more property to our portfolio and land and turning it into Airbnb revenue.
I do wish that we could turn our current condo into Airbnb. I think it would make a killing, but make sure that you look at your HOA rules, because that would never fly with our current HOA, which was the only downside.
Yeah, that's extremely true. Definitely always look into, if it's a condo, the HOA, even if it's a freestanding house, the town and the county. Many towns have put a hurdle in front of Airbnb owners. Some towns have made you not able to do it at all. At our lake house, for example, one of the towns that is on the border of the lake doesn't allow for Airbnbs at all. It has to be a 30-day rental or longer, whereas the town that we're in allows for it. I loved when we went and bought our condo in Killington, Vermont, that Killington has already addressed Airbnbs in a positive way. They've figured out a system to where they can track the number of Airbnbs in the town, make some money off of it from a tax revenue standpoint for the township, and also give you as a future investor the comfort that they're not going to up and change the rules. Our house in New Jersey on the lake, they haven't really addressed how they're going to handle Airbnbs or if they're going to even address them. So we've always got this lingering fear in our mind that what if one day they change it to no Airbnbs at all in the whole town? That would change our lifestyle drastically, and we'd have to either sell that house and buy something in a different place, which we don't necessarily want to do. But yeah, definitely look into the rules and regulations surrounding any property acquisitions if you plan to turn it into a short-term rental.
Yeah. So Eric, coming up on, I think, roughly 2 years, you guys have been on the road full time. Looking back, what advice would you give your 5-year younger self?
Buy a house earlier. Buy a truck camper earlier, but buy a house earlier. Yeah, I would say to try and have done the things that we've done now. I wish I did them a little bit earlier in life. And I feel like a lot of people would say that about themselves, like invest in yourself earlier and don't wait. Take that leap into whether it be home ownership or truck camper ownership sooner rather than later. If we hadn't bought this truck camper, we would have never been able to rent our house out on Airbnb, because it became our house while we rented our home out on Airbnb. And if I had done this when I was 23 or something like that, if I had, 10 years earlier, man, I would be hopefully on, property number 4 if I had given myself another 10 years to accomplish what it took us in the last 5 years to accomplish.
And as a full-time overland nomad, what, if anything, has restored your faith in humanity?
Being the same answer that was to the question you guys asked, which was our biggest hurdle, is also being broken down here in Mexico. That this whole experience has restored my faith in humanity. From the moment that we broke down, we've had people offering a helping hand, whether it be taking our water jug into town with them to fill it up, bringing us beer, bringing us into town. A great way to put it is when we were broken down there, Marisa and I, on separate occasions, got into cars with complete strangers and hitchhiked essentially into San Jose del Cabo. You wouldn't normally do that in the United States because it would feel not safe. And I'm not saying you should do that everywhere in Mexico, but there's definitely something to be said for the hospitality of people down here and people that realize that you're in a trying situation. They are so generous and kind with their willingness to come out and help you. The friends that we're parked in front of right now, of their house, they came out to us with their truck camper and brought us 24 gallons of water. They brought us food. They brought us beer. And they brought themselves with them to hang out because they knew that we were just kind of isolated there. And
awesome.
The humanitarian aspect has been great. So I wouldn't trade it for the world.
If you could put any message on every billboard in America, what would that be?
Live each day like it's your last. That would be my slogan.
Let's wrap it up with some fun facts about you, Eric. What's your favorite genre of music? And between you and Marisa, who's the better singer?
Ooh. Favorite genre of music would probably be rock or alternative rock. Who's the better singer? I don't think either one of us. We're both pretty bad singers, but we do a great job of singing horribly together when driving down the road.
Oh, there you go.
When a certain song comes on that we both know the lyrics to, and it's time to belt out some horrible notes, we're both there to keep each other company as we sing poorly together.
Oh, I love it. It's awesome.
What's a favorite drink in the morning to get you going?
Coffee. Hot and black.
What's a favorite beverage at night to wind down after a long day?
Any kind of alcohol, whether it's beer or margarita. That would be my preferred if I'm looking to wind down, some sort of a cocktail.
What's your best advice to aspiring overlanders and adventure enthusiasts listening right now?
Don't think about it. Get out there and do it. I think a lot of people probably put too many roadblocks in front of themselves, thinking that they can't make the overlanding full-time travel lifestyle work. But these days, with the amount of remote jobs that are out there or seasonal jobs that are available to you, we're still learning as we go about what other avenues there are for making money while on the road. And we look forward to the opportunities that travel is going to yield for us to make money and be in some very cool places. So I think if people limit themselves by feeling like they have to have already figured out the new job part of travel, they might keep themselves from forever taking the necessary leap into jumping into their driver's seat and getting out on the road. But if you can save up, enough money to where you feel okay for a few months, I would encourage people to get after it, because the longer you wait, the more regret you're going to have. You could have a health scare or something, and you're at any age, and all of a sudden find that, you should have done it earlier. And that's something I want to never feel about our time here traveling and stuff like that. I don't want to feel like I should have done it earlier. I have those moments, but I would like to continue going forward with not feeling like I missed out.
And how can people learn more about you?
So people can learn more about us on our Instagram page and on YouTube. Our Instagram page we've been present on for about the last 4 years, and YouTube is something more new to us. You'll be able to learn more about us through YouTube than on Instagram, I would say. On Instagram, a lot of the things that we capture are our adventures with the truck and maybe less of our own face in front of the camera. But on YouTube, you definitely get an opportunity to hear my silly sense of humor that I have, watch Marisa roll her eyes at me as I make those silly jokes, and things that you probably won't get on Instagram. But in terms of communication, we're equally communicative on both platforms. So feel free to send us any questions you might have through Instagram or YouTube. We'll be happy to answer them. Our handle on both is the Cummins Camper.
Hearing Marisa laugh in the background as she's taking video is the best.
Yeah, that composting toilet one definitely had a moment where she had some uncontrollable laughter in the background while I was going through the cleaning process.
Well, your ability to keep a straight face and just keep rolling is pretty awesome.
I appreciate it. It's hard to stomach my internal laughter and keep chatting away at the camera, but I do enjoy it.
Any more information you'd like to give or useful resources our listeners should check out?
There's so many different resources for folks. I would say that Facebook groups, there's a ton of information to be had on there, sometimes both good and bad. But I think that's a great starting point for people if you're curious about van life or truck campers or whatever type of traveling you're going to do. There's a Facebook group for it. Instagram is another great avenue for people to learn about rigs and what type of items are necessary in order to sustain full-time travel. OVERLAND is another one. I was shocked to hear of some pretty famous YouTubers, Kara and Nate. They didn't know much about OVERLAND, and I was like blown away that it hadn't been brought to their attention. So OVERLAND is definitely a piece of information that most travelers should not go without.
Love it. Eric, we really appreciate your time. Give Marisa our best, and we will hopefully catch up with you, maybe even down in Baja next winter, because I am not going to be in Portland next winter. I can guarantee you that.
We will be in Portland.
Yes,
You should definitely do Baja next winter. Everybody that I've talked to and met down here that have come down for their first time are talking about how they can't wait to come down here next year for an even longer duration of time. You guys will absolutely love the time you spend down here.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your time also and the opportunity to chat with you both.